They were hitchhiking, enjoying the sights in Canada, when unfortunately, the worst possible person let them in their car. And the question remains, who was driving that car? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Andrea Scherpf and Bernd Göricke. Viewer discretion is advised. This one will probably be much shorter than what I usually would do. I've been a bit under the weather recently, and also this case just doesn't have a plethora of information on it, unfortunately. I barely know anything about the actual victims here, which is a bummer. All I know is that Andrea Scherp was born in December of 1959 and was 24 years old at the time of this case, and Bernd Göricke was born in June of 1956, and he was 27 years old at the time. Both of them were born and raised in West Germany, and right before all of this happened, Bernd had completed his university, and he and his fiancee, Andrea, planned a trip to Canada as a way of celebrating Bernd's graduation. And as far as I know, they had been engaged for a while, but I don't actually know if they had a planned wedding date or not. They first went to Western Canada because they actually had family members who were living in that area at the time. So they wanted to visit and spend some time with them. First, by going to Winnipeg in Manitoba, and then to an area called Roblin in Manitoba. From there, they would begin a backpacking adventure in which they would travel by hitchhiking. Now, all of this happened in 1983, and hitchhiking at that point was still very, very common. Now, at that point, people did know of the dangers of hitchhiking, but they also weren't aware of the true horrors behind it, like we know today. The lack of internet obviously would still leave a lot of people blissfully unaware of how scary hitchhiking was. They were also being very frugal in their trip. They did not have a ton of extra money, so they would camp in desolate locations in order to not have to waste money on hotels or motels. So the last time anyone would recall seeing them was on October 3rd, 1983. They were observed hitchhiking near Chetwynd, British Columbia. It sounds like there were enough witnesses who could place them there at the time and saw them getting into a 1960s Chevy pickup truck. I believe it was described as being a reddish colored truck. People who saw the driver of said truck said he looked to maybe be in his 40s with a medium build. He had shoulder length brown hair. But after the couple got into this man's truck, the couple was never seen alive ever again. A few days later, on October 6, 1983, the bodies of two individuals were found roughly 32 kilometers west from Chetwynd, off of Highway 97 near the Pine River. When the bodies were found, they had no identification on them, no wallets, no cash, nothing. So figuring out who they were took some time. They had to use forensic dentistry, and through that, they discovered the individuals likely were from Europe, which then got investigators in touch with Interpol. I'm assuming dental records were found and would end up matching Andrea and Bernd. And through that, it was actually confirmed that the couple traveling from Germany were the victims of this brutal double homicide. They had both been shot to death. Also, when their bodies were found roughly a kilometer away, they also found a pair of jeans that had been covered in blood. They would also learn that the couple had several traveler's checks on them, but they were missing when the bodies were found. However, it is possible to trace those and once they are used, and they were able to discover those checks were in fact cashed after the couple was murdered. So we're talking like the day or two after this couple would have been confirmed murdered, you have these checks being cashed. In the 2 days after the murders, this person went to 5 different gas stations to use these checks. In Prince George, in Quesnel, in Macleys Lake, in Laclahash, and 100 Mile House. Authorities can absolutely track the transactions and can even see the signatures on the checks, which were either clearly forged and were also signed with just a bogus signature. And each time this happened, you have to think there was a clerk who stared right at this person, got good looks of him. However, they weren't aware they're supposed to be remembering this guy at that point. Nobody knows a murder has happened yet. Nobody knows they are looking for a killer. So when it's just another customer amongst potentially hundreds you see a day, these folks likely won't remember the man they saw. There were no cameras. This was obviously 1983, and that just wasn't a thing that we had everywhere like we do today. It gave police a path to go on, like a physical path. They knew the direction this man was driving, but then once the checks ran out, this pathway stopped. So he could have literally gone anywhere. Going back to the jeans, the blood on the jeans was analyzed, and in 1983, they could do like DNA typing, and they determined that the blood on the jeans matched both victims. So both of their blood types were on it. So at that point, it wasn't super helpful. But from there, they were at a loss. People saw the couple getting into a pickup truck, got a decent look at the guy driving it, but was he their killer? Or did he drop them off and they were picked up by someone else in a different area? They really had no way of knowing. But this guy is someone they at least want to talk to, but he never comes forward. So the case basically stops dead in its tracks until 1989. It was August of 1989 when police got a major tip from a woman called Madonna Mary Kelly. That's a very interesting name. And she claims that she heard a direct confession to the murders. A man named Andy Rose, someone she knew, said he was the one to have killed them. Her recounting of the events of the confession were, I guess you could say, eerily similar to the crime. Apparently, Andy Rose came to her trailer one day, completely drunk out of his mind. His jeans rolled up, he was covered in blood, and he just openly said he killed 2 Germans. He knew that they were shot to death, so police at that point, they actually arrest Andy Rose and they charge him with the double murder. Despite having no physical evidence connecting him to the crime, all they actually have is a third-party source saying he confessed. At his trial, the prosecution would fail to show that he was the one to cash the traveler's checks. They had no way of identifying him. They failed to show he owned a red pickup truck. They failed to prove he was the man the witnesses saw in the truck. They failed to connect him by any physical evidence such as fingerprints or DNA. All they had at that time was the testimony of this woman who said he confessed. And the jury believed her. He was found guilty of the double murder and sentenced to life in prison. But by 1994, and I'm not sure exactly what the appeal was about, but he successfully appealed his conviction and it was ordered to a new trial. The second trial was virtually the exact same as the first one, same lack of physical evidence, and rested solely on the testimony of Madonna Mary Kelly. Once again, he is found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But then, another twist in 1997. Another confession from another man, also told from a third-party source. A woman named Willadine Hill said her now-deceased husband, Vance Hill, said he killed the couple. He was in Chetwynd in 1983, and he actually had even been arrested in Chetwynd for unrelated charges at that time. But he apparently said, I killed that couple. But in 1985, he took his own life. That puts a wrench in things. Just like the first witness, this witness waited years to come forward. So could they take it seriously? But Andy Rose's conviction is now tossed for a second time. And there is now a third trial ordered. However, before this trial will begin, they do what is known as a Mr. Big operation on Andy Rose. I've talked about these before. Personally, I think it's a very, very questionable investigative tactic. So its essential premise is this. Undercover officers, they will basically pose as members of a criminal organization, and they will try to get a suspect of a crime to be recruited to this fake organization. But in order to join, this person has to admit to a crime they've committed in hopes that they will confess to the crime that they are actually under investigation for. It's worked before. It also hasn't worked. It's gotten convictions overturned before. I personally think it's a horrible tactic, but that's just me. But Andy never openly brings up the double murders. So basically, the undercovers bring it up. And they pressure him, and he basically says, quote, well, we'll go with I did it then, okay? Which is hardly a confession. That's a man who's tired of being pressured into saying what they want him to say. But also, the DNA technology has finally advanced over the years, and now by 1997, 1998, they can test the DNA on the genes more extensively, and they are in for a surprise. They do, in fact, find blood DNA from both victims. That's always been there. There is additional DNA, though, from not one or two, but three other people. When tested against their two known suspects, Andy Rose and Vance Hill, there is no match. Both men are actually excluded from being contributors to the DNA. So at that point, because of this new evidence, the third trial never really completes, and they drop all charges against Andy Rose. He did not kill this couple, neither did Vance Hill, but someone did. Was it the man in that red truck? Was it someone else after he dropped them off somewhere else? Three different contributors, though. What could that mean? Well, it could suggest that someone they hitchhiked with, maybe it was really close quarters in the car. Maybe they're in one of those, old pickup trucks where the main area is very tight, and maybe the driver's hand brushed up against the jeans and just left DNA that way, because not all the DNA was blood DNA. Numerous people could have touched those jeans during that trip, but the killer's DNA is on them as well. They feel confident about that. So far, even with our current advancements in DNA, there is still no match. They have run the DNA through the database, but still a giant goose egg. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know where they are at with it right now. I'm not sure if they've reopened this case recently to retest DNA, or if it's all just sitting in a box in a freezer indefinitely. I don't know. I don't know if they've tried genetic genealogy. I'm not sure whatsoever. But hopefully, one day soon, they do process everything again, and they can hopefully get those answers. Andrea and Bernd were just celebrating Bernd's graduation and were looking forward to getting married and starting a family. That never came to be. Hitchhiking is one of the scariest things a person could do in the 70s through the 90s. It's just that not everyone knew how deadly it was back then. Because you're hitchhiking in an unfamiliar area where a total stranger picks you up off a random street where there are usually no witnesses, and it's the perfect crime back then. Before the advancements in forensic technology and cameras being everywhere, it was the easiest way to get away with murder. Someone somewhere out there has got to know the truth about who killed Andrea Scherpf and Bernd Göricke, and perhaps that someone is you. If you have any information on this case, you are asked to please call the Chetwynd RCMP detachment at 250-788-9221, or reach out to BC Crime Stoppers, and you can do this anonymously at 1-800-222-8477. Please help them get the justice they rightfully deserve. But that is it for this case, True Crime Rooney Dooney Dingleberry Dongs. I do apologize for it being a short one, but one, again, I'm not feeling well, and two, when I choose cases randomly off my list like I do, I can't guarantee there's going to be a lot of information on them, so I just have to roll with it, and we get what we get. So unfortunately, this is one of those cases that just has very little info, but it doesn't mean it doesn't deserve to be told through a podcast or on a YouTube video or whatever. But anyway, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here. I'm new at the podcast thing. This is only like my fourth or fifth one, but I normally tell short form true crime stories on TikTok, where I've got 3 million followers over there. I also have my YouTube channel where I tell longer form true crime stories, obviously with video and all that. So feel free to follow me anywhere you like. The link to all of that hopefully is in the description of this podcast episode below, or in the podcast episode somewhere, but it's also available on my main podcast page. It should be, at least if you're on Spotify. I'm not sure how it shows up elsewhere, but if not, TikTok and YouTube, I am making a true crime just the way it's spelled here on this podcast. Very easy to find me on those places as well. So at any rate, that is it for this case, True Crime Rooney. So until the next one, ta-ta for now.